And they went to a place which was called Gethsemane, and he said to his disciples, "Sit here while I pray." And he took with him Peter and James and John, and began to be greatly distressed and troubled. And he said to them, "My soul is very sorrowful, even to death. Remain here and watch." And going a little farther, he fell on the ground and prayed that, if it were possible, the hour might pass from him. And he said, "Abba, Father, all things are possible to thee. Remove this cup from me, yet not what I will, but what thou wilt." And he came and found them sleeping, and he said to Peter, "Simon, are you asleep? Could you not watch 1 hour? Watch and pray that you may not enter into temptation. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak." And again he went away and prayed, saying the same words. And again he came and found them sleeping, for their eyes were very heavy, and they did not know what to answer him. And he came the third time and said to them, "Are you still sleeping and taking your rest? It is enough. The hour has come. The Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us be going. See, my betrayer is at hand."
Won't you take this cup from me? This fear has stolen all my sleep. If tomorrow means my death, pray you'll save their souls with it. Let the songs I sing bring joy to you. Let the words I say confess my love. Let the notes I choose be a favorite tune. Father, let my heart be after you. In this hour of doubt I see who I am is not just me. To give me strength to die myself, so love can live to tell the tale. Let the songs I sing bring joy to you. Let the words I say confess my love. Let the notes I choose be a favorite too. Father, let my heart be after you. Father, let my heart be after you.
This is a different kind of Good Friday. We miss being in the sanctuary, all gathered together for our beautiful traditional Good Friday service. Instead, we're huddled around screens, hoping for some kind of message that gives us meaning and hope for these uncertain and difficult times. And they are difficult. Every day we hear more numbers escalating, and we're already tired of isolating and being in our homes. But in the midst of it, there's some good news too, right? It comes in the form of those people who are giving of themselves for others. We see medical personnel and first responders working long hours, putting their own health at risk to ensure that others get the opportunity to recover. We see people donating money. Some stars are donating huge amounts of money. And folks are in their homes sewing masks for others. Everywhere we look, it seems like there are people who are giving of themselves for others. I think one of my most favorite and compelling stories of this comes out of Italy. It's a 72-year-old priest. His name is Father Giuseppe Baldino. When he contracted the illness, his church bought him his own respirator. But instead of keeping it for himself, Father Giuseppe donated it to a younger patient, someone he didn't even know. It's a beautiful story of sacrificial love. And that is the message of Good Friday, isn't it? We see it perfectly in the story that we just heard of Jesus in the garden. Jesus comes to the garden to pray, to wrestle with this future that is ahead of him. He knows the cross is coming, and with the cross is pain and suffering. 3 times he prays, and 3 times he asks God to take this cup from him. The cup is just the suffering, the cross that is ahead. He knows that God could deliver him from this. He says the words, "I know with you nothing is impossible." All Jesus had to do was say the word, and God would deliver him from the fate of the cross. And yet, as he wrestles, as he struggles, the scripture says that he is very distressed and filled with sorrow. This is a very human moment for Jesus. As he struggles with this call upon his life to give himself for others, he is bolstered with strength in his prayer, and he prays the prayer that is the center of this whole story. And Jesus prays, "Not my will, but thine be done." And in that prayer, Jesus says yes. Jesus freely chooses the path of the cross. In that prayer, Jesus sets in motion the events that will lead him to pain and suffering and death on the cross. And he does it out of love. As you hear the other stories this Good Friday evening, as you reflect on them moving into Easter and hear the story of Easter, I hope that you will take in it this one central message. Jesus gave himself for us out of love, for all of humanity, for you and for me, out of love. Friends, the message for this Good Friday in these uncertain times is simply this: you are not alone. You have a God who understands pain and suffering and hard choices. You are not alone, and you are loved.
Then they seized him and led him away, bringing him into the high priest's house. Peter followed at a distance, and when they had kindled a fire in the middle of the courtyard and sat down together, Peter sat among them. Then a maid, seeing him as he sat in the light and gazing at him, said, "This man also was with him." But he denied it, saying, "Woman, I do not know him." And a little later someone else saw him and said, "You also are one of them." But Peter said, "Man, I am not." And after an interval of about an hour, still another insisted, saying, "Certainly this man also was with him, for he is a Galilean." But Peter said, "Man, I do not know what you are saying." And immediately, while he was still speaking, the cock crowed. And the Lord turned and looked at Peter. And Peter remembered the word of the Lord, how he had said to him, "Before the cock crows today, you will deny me 3 times." And he went out and wept bitterly. Now the men who were holding Jesus mocked him and beat him. They also blindfolded him and asked him, "Prophesy, who is it that struck you?" And they spoke many other words against him, reviling him. When the day came, the assembly of the elders of the people gathered together, both chief priests and scribes. And they led him away to their council, and they said, "If you are the Christ, tell us." But he said to them, "If I tell you, you will not believe, and if I ask you, you will not answer. But from now on the Son of Man shall be seated at the right hand of the power of God." And they all said, "Are you the Son of God then?" And he said to them, "You say that I am." And they said, "What further testimony do we need? We have heard it ourselves from his own lips."
You're the Son of God. Throw yourself down. Surely your Father will heed your call. Surely the angels will catch your fall. God, why do you start? Turn these rocks into loaves of bread. Find pleasure in the evening within your bed. Oh, you're the Son of God. Why is there pain? Are you weak or are you not good? Or will you be defeated by a cross of wood? If you're the Son of God, vanquish my enemies, protect my borders and securities, and crush the heads of those who rob my peace. Praise the Son of God, the one who has set me free. He is my passage from the gates of hell. He is my refuge from the infidel. Praise the Son of God, who knows my every will. For pleasure is the blessing, child, and I must have my fill.
Just after Jesus was arrested in the Garden of Gethsemane, Peter and the other disciples followed along behind the guards that had taken Jesus to trial at the high priest's house. All of the Gospels record that Jesus went into the house of the high priest and that Peter and the other disciples were left in the courtyard around a charcoal fire that had been built in the courtyard. When the sun goes down in Israel, the air is cold. And so if the sun is not shining on you, a fire is needed, for it is very chill and very cold in the air there. So Peter stands around the fire with the others in the courtyard. And soon we see unfold the thing that Jesus predicted, that Peter, when asked if he knew Jesus, would continually deny him, would in fact deny 3 times that he had any knowledge of Jesus or who he was. And this is in fact what comes to pass. The others in the crowd question him because he's obviously from Galilee, where Jesus is from. And he's standing around the fire denying that he knew the man that he had been following for the last 3 years. Finally, when he has said it the 3rd time, that he has no idea who Jesus is and is not one of his disciples, the Gospel of Luke has a very unusual note that the other Gospels don't have. The Gospel of Luke says, just as Peter denied Jesus the 3rd time, Jesus turned and looked at him. And then the cock crowed, just as the Lord had said. How awful must that moment have been for Jesus to have turned and looked Peter in the eye after he had denied him the 3rd time. How many of us, when faced with that same situation, would have done anything different? How many of us would not have denied that we knew Jesus, were he in the house arrested and we in the courtyard with others? How many of us would have had the courage to say we knew him and to stand up with him? Who knows whether or not Jesus might not have wanted Peter to remain silent, because if he had spoken, he would no doubt have been arrested also. But the Lord knew that Peter would deny him. It was Peter who didn't believe that possible. The character of Peter in this story represents all of us at our worst moments. All of us when we would wish we could do better, when we wish we were braver, when we wish we could stand up more for the things we believe in. Peter represents us in that moment. Of all the disciples, he is the most human. He's the most like us, because in all times he acts emphatically and exuberantly, and he speaks with great courage and bravado. But then in this moment we see that, like all of us, he is limited in the courage that he has and in simply wishing to wait and see how he could wring out of this terrible situation the best that might be. Peter is an example for us in our lives to weigh carefully those times when we can speak, when we can be silent, but especially to know those times when we must speak or forever be ashamed of ourselves and of our witness. As we go into this Good Friday together, let us resolve always to speak our heart and our mind when the world calls to us to give our witness, to speak up as followers of Jesus, that we will not, like Peter, be silent or worse, deny that we know our Lord at all.
When they arrived at the place called the Skull, they crucified him along with 2 other criminals, one on his right and the other on his left. Jesus said, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they're doing." They drew lots as a way of dividing up his clothing. The people were standing around watching, but the leaders sneered at him, saying, "He saved others, let him save himself if he really is the Christ sent from God, the chosen one." The soldiers also mocked him. They came up to him, offering him sour wine and saying, "If you really are the Christ, save yourself." It was now about noon, and darkness covered the whole earth until about 3 o'clock, while the sun stopped shining. Then the curtain in the sanctuary tore down the middle, Crying out in a loud voice, Jesus said, "Father, into your hands I entrust my life." After he said this, he breathed for the last time. After this, Joseph of Arimathea asked Pilate if he could take away the body of Jesus. Joseph was a disciple of Jesus, but a secret one because he feared the Jewish authorities. Pilate gave him permission, so he came and took the body away. Nicodemus, the one who at first had come to Jesus at night, was there too. He brought a mixture of myrrh and aloe, nearly 75 pounds in all. Following Jewish burial customs, they took Jesus' body and wrapped it, with the spices, in linen cloths. There was a garden in the place where Jesus was crucified, and in the garden was a new tomb in which no one had ever been laid. Because it was the Jewish preparation day and the tomb was nearby, they laid Jesus in it.
On a hill far away stood an old rugged cross, the emblem of suffering and shame. And I love that old cross, where the dearest and best for a world of lost sinners was slain. Oh, that old rugged cross, so despised by the world, has a wondrous attraction for me. For the dear Lamb of God left his glory above to bear it to dark Calvary. So I cherish the old rugged cross till my trophies at last I lay down. I will cling to the old rugged cross and exchange it someday for a crown. In the old rugged cross, stained with blood so divine, a wondrous beauty I see. For the dear Lamb of God left his glory above to pardon and sanctify me. So I cherish the old rugged cross till my trophies at last I lay down. I will cling to the old rugged cross and exchange it someday for a crown. On a hill far away stood an old rugged cross, the emblem of suffering and shame.
As we have seen throughout this holy season of Lent, and we've seen in the scriptures for this Good Friday, Jesus enters into the suffering for all of humankind willingly, but he does not do so gladly. In the Garden of Gethsemane, he goes through anguish, anxiety, and even a sadness about what he is choosing to do when he says to God, Not my will, but yours. He experiences the betrayal of a loved one. A brother in life and faith says nearly to his face, I told you I never knew the man. And now, he enters into the final part of his earthly life, his crucifixion and his death. We go through this each year in our Christian faith. And in the nearly 2,000 years that Christian tradition has remembered the death of Jesus, each time we remember this act of self-sacrificial love. Every time, it feels different. It may hit us as individuals or families or groups much differently than in previous years. This Lent is one of those times. In the midst of the chaotic, difficult times that we find ourselves, often we feel surrounded by fear, anxiety, and even death, all created and heightened by this global pandemic. In this text, we see Jesus, God dwelling in human flesh, fully human, fully divine, being not only killed and executed, but mocked and derided. Insult is added to his injury. And so many of us feel like we as individuals or a community have been through a lot lately in this season of our lives. And it feels like we're being kicked while we're down. This is a real life experience for so many people right now, all around our world, in our communities and in our families. In these dark and chaotic days, the crucifixion and death of Jesus Christ may have never felt more real to each of us. It matters so much to have a God who understands the full range of our human life, even death. That there is no part of our lives that God does not understand because Jesus went through the full stretch of human life and death. And it matters that God, as parent, understands the anguish we feel when we lose loved ones, when we experience the death of someone we care for and love. God knows this. Even the very Son of God died. In this season of Lent, we have been learning together what it means to be human. We have been saying together the creed that begins with the phrase, "We are not alone." And so each week in worship and in our homes and streets, across social media and across the world, we have been reminding each other that we are not alone in this. And even in death, even in despair, even in the darkest of times, even amidst isolation and separation, we are not alone. It's said that John Wesley, the founder of the Methodist Renewal Movement, on his deathbed, with his dying breath, said this, "Best of all, God is with us." So may we remember that even in the darkest times, in the valley of the shadow of death, God is with us, and nothing can separate us from God's presence and God's love. And best of all, God is with us.